UN Secretary General to lead an unprecedented international effort to analyze these alarming new trends and to propose an agenda for global action. It was 1983. The World Commission on Environment and Development, a title we chose, to illustrate that our challenge was as much people as nature. We invited a broad global process and dialogue, inviting universities, businesses, industries, civil society, not just governments, to take part in a wide-ranging analysis across all sectors of society and in identifying issues of environment and development concern. In 1987, 30 years ago, we concluded our analysis and gave our recommendations, launched our report, Our Common Future, in London. We called for radical transformation and change in our existing pattern of development in order to protect and safeguard planet Earth and humanity itself. We addressed the threat of climate change and a number of other critical areas of concern to the global community. But mark this, we did not call for zero growth. We were convinced that growth was needed to meet human needs and overcome poverty. But we needed a different pattern of growth, one that could be sustainable. We defined the new concept of sustainable development as a pattern of development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And that was end of quote. Now this conference is about putting people at the center of development. Yes, this is exactly what we need to do, and exactly what we call for in our common future. However, as we also underline, and as I'm sure this audience is conscious about, this goal needs to be combined with the reality that we all depend on a safe environment and protection of nature. In our report, we made very clear that the only way to safeguard the environment was to secure the rights of all people, women and girls as well as men and boys, and all across the world. In 2015, the world's leaders finally agreed on the Sustainable Development Goals in New York, and later that year in Paris on climate. It had taken 28 years for the world to come together and agree on these fundamental challenges. We now have a global blueprint for action. The reality is that we are in this together, and that had finally now taken hold. We are all responsible to do our part, not only all governments and all private businesses and other actors, but each and every one of us as individuals. Crucially, I believe the fact that the Sustainable Development Goals ended up being applicable to all countries, not just to the developing ones, managed to help bridge serious differences between groups of countries. This also made it possible to bridge difficult gaps in the climate negotiations, and it helped make it possible to have the climate agreement. So finally, the agreements apply to all of us in all our countries. Now, your organizers has asked me the following question. Are the SDGs addressing the right issues? Well, my response to this will be a little provocative. First, just let us imagine if I personally, as an individual, should have formulated my own global footprint. What would that have contained, and how would it have been written? Secondly, if any one of us in this audience could have been given the same opportunity. Since none of us would have had the power or the authority to implement our ideal, our personal plans, it would all have been a nice exercise, but basically to no avail. The beauty of what we now have before us is the consensus that has so painstakingly been built over those 28 years. It has required many years of hard work, through strong disputes and frustration, to end up in an agreed framework for action. And having said this, let me also add, I have personally followed and been part of this whole process for decades. I have now and then had reason to celebrate progress and breakthroughs in the direction of my own beliefs, values and principles, those that I hold dear, and that our report 30 years ago illustrated. Let me mention just some of these examples. There was a really long fight to have gender and the rights of girls and women fully addressed. The same was the case with regard to equality as a common good and a common goal, both between and within countries. It may seem surprising, but it was also a hard struggle to address and place the climate issue as an essential goal in itself within the SDGs, where it clearly belongs. It is one of the 17. And believe it or not, and this was one of the reasons for years and years, energy was being defined as a no-go. Many countries insisting that energy was a so-called national issue held this major factor hostage. The cooperative movement, with your diversified backgrounds and different roles as workers, members, researchers, managers, policymakers, board members, you also cover a broad range of sectors. They range from agriculture, fisheries, banking, retail, industry, and services, housing, insurance, energy, and more. This shows clearly how you are a potential major partner in a number of the most crucial areas we need to address as we implement our goals for 2030. I have also observed that your alliance already has identified a few key areas for action where cooperatives can have the greatest impact. Eradicating poverty, improving access to basic goods and services, protecting the environment, and building a more sustainable food system. They all are indeed crucial points of concern to us all. They do illustrate how we can best work together for our common goals, based on shared values and insights that can promote the common good. I know you have stated cooperatives can reduce poverty in situations where the state and individuals fail. End of quote. It is great that you are identifying potential pledges also in a number of key areas, such as agricultural production, nutritious food, offerings in your stores, jobs, gender parity, health insurance, access to electricity, share of renewables, retail level food waste, and reducing carbon footprint, just to mention some of the important ones. Now, helping build a more sustainable food system, as I see you have been focusing on, in collaboration with FAO, is one of the key areas where we need real change and transformation. Food and agricultural cooperatives have a role to play in eradicating hunger, improving food security and livelihoods of poor rural people. Since this is such a considerable portion of your movement, it certainly can make a difference in people's lives. They help small producers with access to markets, information about food prices, and critical inputs such as seeds and fertilizers, as well as loans. I think it is especially inspiring how cooperatives in this sector impact their communities by serving as a platform for producers to join in policy processes, increasing their influence through the power of the collective. Indeed, we do need all those forces that have an experience and attitude that can bring us all forward. You know, the whole history of the cooperative movement gives us an illustration of how individuals and communities realize their dependence upon one another for the necessities of daily life, for security, for health, education, and the hope of a decent life. The cooperative movement has by now been a vital force for good across the world for centuries. This story also illustrates how societies learned and matured into the basic principles of democracy and human rights. Undoubtedly, the cooperative movement has played a crucial role in our global history of building more common action and more common responsibility. As we all must be aware, the road we need to travel still goes in exactly that same direction. This certainly is not old-fashioned. I am also glad to say that I am one of you. I am personally one among the most impressive number of 1 billion members of a cooperative. This was part of my own upbringing and my family background, its convictions and values in my own country, Norway. Through deliberate collaboration for the common good, our small country, one of the poorest in Europe a century ago, grew to be one of the richest in the world. And dear audience, you know, this had happened already before we found oil under the North Sea in 1969. We are all stakeholders as we look into the future for our children, our communities, and ourselves. Given that cooperatives are people-centered and values-driven, locally owned and managed, they clearly can play a key role as we move forward to implement the Sustainable Development Goals. As we look ahead to 2030, we have enormous challenges ahead of us, although much has also happened during the 30 years since our report. And of course, since the turn of the last century, when the world agreed on the Millennium Development Goals. We have dramatically reduced the proportion of people living in extreme poverty. Life expectancy has increased. More people have access to safe drinking water. Fewer children are dying in infancy, and fewer mothers die while giving birth to new generations. And we have significantly reduced pollution from industries. But one must only look at the headlines to know that problems abound and inequity persists. In an era of astounding wealth, approximately 1 in 10 people still live on less than $1.90 a day. A report released in January by Oxfam found that 8 men own the same wealth as the 3.5 2.6 billion people who make up the poorest half of humanity. Believe it or not. Technology has moved us forward by leaps and bounds, yet a mosquito bite can still kill a child. Industrialization has transformed societies, such as this one, yet environmental destruction continues, and the effects of climate change threaten the world's most vulnerable populations and ecosystems. Now, compounded by ongoing conflict and insecurity in many communities, a record number of people have been forced to flee their homes in search of safety. The forces of inequality and injustice contribute to global instability, which hurt citizens and businesses alike. So while we have made progress, we have not yet reached the just, secure, and prosperous world we called for in our common future. I believe this is the case. Business and society will either rise together or fall together. And in this context, the cooperative sector can inspire a more holistic thinking based on the values and principles it holds. The good news is that I am optimistic we can rise together, but it will require business unusual. An excessive focus on short-term profit has shut hundreds of millions of people out of global progress. It has left businesses more vulnerable to global volatility, and it has eroded trust between business and society. Yet there are also grounds for hope. Over the past 30 years, we have seen a whole new and comprehensive body of norms and ethical standards for business. We have the UN Global Compact, to which thousands of businesses around the world have signed up with. We have the principles of responsible investment, convening investors which direct and redirect trillions every year. We have new rules on human rights and business, the Global Reporting Initiative, and a set of sustainability reporting requirements, sometimes set by regional stock exchanges, other times laid down by laws regulating annual reporting, such as, for example, in Norway. Responsible leaders recognize that unsustainable practices, which may seem exterior to their own activity, is in fact interior to their wider business opportunity. And over and beyond that, what just referred to, we have ethical rules for different investment funds. A pioneering set of such is the Norwegian Government Pension Fund, also called the Oil Fund. This fund and the ethical guidelines hold 9,000 companies around the world accountable. Knowing that being expelled from this fund on ethical grounds will not please their investors. The ethical guidelines of the Oil Fund have become the gold standard, the global one for investment funds, and are being emulated by other funds. So frankly, there is no turning back. The need for private sector engagement is stronger than ever. We cannot solve global challenges without the resources, the expertise, technology, and brain power of all categories of businesses. This was, of course, clearly recognized in 2015 when the UN member states adopted the Sustainable Development Goals and indeed addressed also the cooperative movement. Increasingly, the business community has embraced the pursuit of the Sustainable Development Goals as a social responsibility and indeed as an economic opportunity. Consumers now factor sustainability into decisions. Young people as customers and employees demand corporate sustainability, and families that move from poverty to prosperity do open new markets. A recent report from the Business and Sustainable Development Commission found that sustainable business models in four key areas: energy, cities, food and agriculture, and health and well-being could create US $12 trillion of economic opportunity and generate up to 380 million jobs by 2030. So increasingly, businesses are not merely incorporating sustainability into their existing plans. They are building their plans around it. So what steps could and should the business community take to continue this progress? Well, first, respect human rights of employees, customers, and workers throughout supply chains. When an estimated 168 million children are working instead of learning, when women do not receive equal pay for equal work, or when labor is forced, not free, for millions, it is clear that human rights must be a higher priority on the business agenda. The UN Global Compact and the UN Human Rights Office guiding principles on business and human rights provide important frameworks to protect human rights. So respect for people's human rights is not just part of a social development agenda. It is its essential bedrock. So secondly, address inequalities. Corporate culture has been a key driver of the growing divide between the haves and the have-nots. It also has the power to help close that gap. I want to particularly highlight the obligation and opportunity of empowering women around the world. Countries, and you know this for a fact, countries and companies with higher levels of gender equality have faster growth, they have better performance. And companies that support the empowerment of women within and outside their ranks will be on a stronger footing. Third, companies can commit to leading on the Sustainable Development Goals. This includes aligning corporate goals with the SDGs, working across an industry to establish benchmarks and to increase impact, and sharing expertise with governments and with NGOs. And you know, while we can hope that voluntary action by business will help us reach the 2-degree target, I believe that it will not be possible without policies, regulations, taxes, and incentives that can drive change. We have experience with measures that do work. We actually know what we need to do, and we have experience with political leaders prescribing too low doses of the needed medicine. It is crucial for the public and private sectors to come together to measure and price what really matters. The marketplace must reflect the full ecological and human costs of economic decisions and establish the right price signals that make transparent the consequences both of action and of inaction. From this 3 points forward, first, pollution, including carbon emissions, must be priced higher. And second, subsidies should be made transparent. They should be phased out for fossil fuels. Thirdly, we must build new ways to measure development beyond the traditional GDP. Now, maybe ironically, these are recommendations that we presented in the UN report back in 1987. But you know, 28 years is a long time, but in historical terms, for 190 nations and more to agree on common principles, it may not be so strange that it took 28 years. Throughout the 20th century, economic growth was measured by the accumulation of physical, financial, and human capital, but without regard to changes in natural capital, and without taking social risks into account. In the 21st century, the goal must be a green economy that can generate economic growth and improvements in people's lives without harming the environment. You know, this is not a burden to be borne, it is an opportunity to be seized. It means taking advantage of the vast potential to increase resource productivity. It means investing in sustainable technologies that will create jobs and support the poor, that will improve health and education, and build more resilient and equitable societies. And it means minimizing risks while expanding prosperity. So, you know, we will all benefit from the many decisions taken by businesses and indeed by institutions that look beyond the short term and that choose business-worthy investments and solutions for the future. These are the actors and innovators we will see succeed. These will prove to be the heroes of the young generation. Businesses generally, as well as the cooperative sector specifically, of course, has long been an important force for wealth creation. Today, they can also be a much greater force for justice and for peace. Working with and for society, they can help fulfill the vision of sustainable development that we launched 3 decades ago. Thank you very much.